What if Naruto fell in love with Gara Part 2? There had once been a time when she hadn't known why everyone hated her. A time when she could take it, push the growing hate down into a place where she could feel it slowly growing to encompass the edges of her soul. Then the feeling had been lessened a little over a year before when she'd started the academy and met her first friend, Koji. With Koji came acquaintances that weren't exactly friends but didn't glare at her either. They seemed more wary and uncaring when it came to her presence, though they didn't outright ignore her. Later Koji was the catalyst for her other two friends, Shisui and Itachi, and even Sasuke to some extent. Finally, when they'd graduated, she found a place on a team with Koji and Kasumi. Even if Kasumi wasn't yet a close friend after their last mission, she was definitely becoming such. She'd become one of those select few who helped her fight the hatred threatening her sanity. She shuddered to know what could have been if she'd never entered the academy. Or even worse, the Hokage had never taken the time to care about her. Now she knew exactly why she was hated by the village she was sworn to protect. She was the container for the Kyuubi no Yoko. The demon that had rampaged the village 6 years ago on October 10th, her birthday. She was a Jinchuriki, a human sacrifice, and to make it worse, it had been her father to bring this fate upon her. She'd always looked up to the Yondaime as her hero, her idol. It was in part because of the stories she'd heard from Sarutobi about the Yondaime that made her final decision to enter the academy early so easy. She had never paid that much attention in the academy about him, seeing as she knew pretty much all there was from Gigi, hence her having slept through any mention of his last name. Naruto sniffed sadly as she wiped her nose on the back of her baggy orange and blue jacket. She didn't commonly wear the jacket, preferring not to have a neon orange sign that read "Kill Me Now" painted on her. That was why she had her other jacket, which was similar other than color, and it lacked the color her orange and blue one had. With the Uzumaki swirl on the back, it looked even more like a bull's eye, something she'd realized upon entering the academy as well. Maybe she wore it now, not because of the cold night breeze as she sat on the roof of her apartment building, but from the harsh realization laid upon her a week before. She hadn't known about the Kyuubi then. Her first reaction to knowing, finally, who her father was hadn't been anger or resentment. It had been joy. She finally knew who he was, she had a face for a name, and everything left for her. The Namikaze taijutsu style. The way it seemed she was missing things that should have been obvious. Some prodigy I am, she thought bitterly. I couldn't even realize who my parents were, and I had last names and everything. Though on another hand the villagers had to be just as stupid. There was only one Uzumaki around to have had her, and it wasn't a secret she was married to the Yondaime. Not to mention her appearance. She knew about everything now, or at least she assumed it was everything. The day they returned to the village and Hokage Gigi was told about the mission, he had dismissed everyone but her. He then proceeded to tell her the biggest secret kept from her. He had said with the revelation of who her father was, it was best to tell her now, lest someone else dropped it on her in the future. He'd gently told her the true story of the Kyuubi's defeat, and it had hit her like a brick against glass. She was sure she heard her heart shatter once it kicked in who exactly had been responsible for turning her into a human sacrifice. Her tears came after the anger, the denial, and the yelling. My mother, did she agree to this? She'd asked. Sarutobi sighed. I do not know exactly what went on with this decision, Naru-chan, or how Kushina felt about it. I know Minato seemed to believe there was no choice. At the time I couldn't argue with his logic. He was a good man, and he did love you, dearly. He couldn't ask anyone else to sacrifice what he wasn't willing to. His words were meant to placate her, but they only made her angrier for a time as tears fell, and then she was just numb. She didn't know what to feel. That day he had given her a few scrolls, both from her parents. One seemed to be her birth records and a copy of their will. It of course listed her as the recipient of everything they owned in life, and as family heir to the Uzumaki and Namikaze clans. Naru-chan. If you are reading this, then things have gone wrong. Either war has taken us from you, or something else unforeseen happened. Know that your father and I love you very much. The day I found out about you was the happiest in my life. I swore then I would protect you, and even with my death I will continue to protect you. As I write this letter, I am only about 8 months along, and you should be born within the next few weeks, sometime in mid-October. We can't be sure of your gender, mostly because of my prior condition blocking the machine, but we've decided to name you Naruto either way. Your father was unsure if it was alright when he suggested it, seeing as Naruto is primarily used for boys, but I don't see why it would matter. Naruto can be shortened to Naru if you prefer later in life, and no one said it couldn't be used for a girl as well. I hope life treats you well, and that you at least have your father there with you if I am not. Grow up happy, Naruto, grow to be a strong ninja. Love. Kasen Namikaze Uzumaki Kushina. Naruto had read her mother's letter first, not believing she could take reading her father's at the time. In the end, she had no choice but to see what her father had to say. This was a day later, after she'd cooled off a little though. She'd sat upon the Hokage monument, on the Yondaime's head to read it. Naruto-chan, I don't really know how to start this letter. Part of me is unsure I have a right to leave anything for you after what I'm about to do. But here it goes. If you're reading this, then I'm not going to make it, I'm dead. If that's the case, then I had no choice but to go through with the sealing after all. That also means I told the Sandaime not to give this to you before you knew of me or Kyuubi, or both. Hopefully not before you made Chunin so you could better protect yourself. I want to apologize first. No, please, that if there had been more time, more warning, if I could have thought of another way, I would have never made you the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. But there is no time, and there was no other way. I couldn't take the Kyuubi with me, and you cannot kill a Biju, they are truly immortal. Your mother, my wife, was the Jinchuriki before you. It's always been Uzumakis who hold the demon. The only reason known to either Mito or Kushina was their special chakra and life force. I've always believed it to be more than that, but with Uzushiogakure's destruction we may never truly know. I know Kushina would wish to seal the Kyuubi back into herself, taking it with her into death. But I can't let her. I want her to live. To have the chance to raise you, and I hope she has gotten to do that. If not, then I am truly sorry, my Masumi. I have faith that you will be seen as a hero though, should your status be known, as I fear it will. Though I can only hope, in the end I guess it's all blind faith from here. I know in the end you will be a hero, and a strong kunoichi like your mother was. Stay strong, Naruto. Love. Tusen Namikaze Minato, Yondaime Hokage. She hadn't truly known what to think or feel after reading it. She went through so many different emotions. In the end, she just sat there and cried for the first time in a long time, hugging her knees to her chest. In the back of her mind, she recognized that her father must have cared. There were what looked like tear marks on the end of the letter. It also looked rather rushed, as if he didn't have the time to spare. She realized it must have been written just before he sealed the Kyuubi. Ryo for your problems, a familiar voice said from behind her. She was only a little surprised to find Itachi when she turned her head. She knew it was Itachi from his voice and the way he moved. The Anbu mask and uniform did little to confuse her. Not to mention she was pretty sure Itachi's identity wasn't the secret most other ANBUs were. The fact he wore a weasel mask was a dead giveaway to her as well. Weasel-kun, she greeted, and she was sure if not for the mask she'd have seen him twitch in either amusement or annoyance. The nickname had actually been something she'd given him the first time he'd been assigned to guard her, not long after she'd met him. He'd been surprised she'd known who he was at first. Then she'd smirked, and begun calling him Weasel-kun. I had thought you would be asleep by now. Don't you have another survival exercise tomorrow? Itachi asked. He walked closer, and sat beside her, though not very closely seeing as he was still on duty, with one knee brought up and his left arm resting on it. For a split second she wondered how he could see clearly out of the mask, or be comfortable wearing it. For that matter, how did it stay on? There was no string. It's held on by chakra. Like the tree walking, and water walking exercises, he explained, as if reading her mind. How did you? She trailed off. It's something everyone seems to ask, Itachi said. Even I nearly asked when I joined Anbu. It's kind of obvious once you think about it though. Naruto nodded. I was thinking about what Hokage Gigi told me after the mission to Tea Country, she said, and Itachi nodded. Mother said something about that, he said. I take it you were told about Kyuubi then. You know, he nodded, looking over at her, but of course all she could see were his black eyes, though not as clearly with his mask on. I was a child when that happened. Sasuke had just been born a month or so before, he explained. I knew your mother. She was my mom's friend, and my mom was best friends with your father. Though at times you'd think it was the other way around, my mom and yours that is. My mom, did she meet Makoto sensei through my father? From what I know, Itachi began, tilting his head up to stare at the sky, your mother was on a team with two other females. Rarely done, but one of them was my mother's younger sister, Mayana. You have an aunt. Had, Itachi corrected, interrupting her mid-sentence. She died in the Third Shinobi War, the year I was born. It was through her Kushina-san met my mother originally, then later through your father they became closer friends. Naruto sighed, and biting her lip she asked, do you think I should hate my father for choosing to seal the Kyuubi inside me? Itachi looked her, and moved his mask to the side of his head where it stuck. She could see his face clearly, though it was shadowed by the midnight shadows. I don't think what I think matters, Naru-chan, he began, smiling faintly. I didn't see your father often, my father wasn't his biggest fan. From what I recall he was kind, loyal and fierce. A strong shinobi and powerful Hokage. I don't know exactly why he chose to seal the Kyuubi inside you, there had to be other options, but I doubt he did it to hurt you on purpose. He took a breath, and exhaled calmly. In the end, I think it would be foolish for you not to have resentful feelings towards him. It was his decision to make you the vessel of Kyuubi that caused a lot of your pain. It cost you a childhood, and I'm sure has scarred you mentally and emotionally in some ways. As I said, I doubt he did it for power or to hurt you. Naruto didn't know exactly what to say to his words, but she was moved by them. She was also conflicted. A part of her screamed that she should hate the man for ruining her life, but the other larger part wanted her to take it in stride. So one day she could forgive him, but she would never forget, never. Thank you Weasel Neeson, she muttered, and flushed at the new title she'd given him. Looking over she saw the first true smile, a smile that actually bordered on a grin. It was almost so unlike him she nearly fell sideways off the roof. Itachi's hand shot out, and steadied her with a chuckle. Well, I'm glad I could be of help, Imouto, he said, and she grinned back for a moment. I'm not going to say it won't hurt for a while, Naruto began as she looked back to the moon which shone bright in the night sky. But I don't hate him, I don't think I could. I understand, as a shinobi and Hokage he had to do something. One day I'll be able to say I forgive him, but I won't ever forget. Itachi replaced his mask back over his face, and smiled under it. That's wise, he said, nodding. A shinobi can forgive when the situation calls for it, Naru-chan, but we never forget. Naruto nodded, and gazing above her she smiled softly. One day, too-san, I'll say I forgive you. I just can't right now. Please understand that. She thought, wondering if wherever her parents were in the afterlife they could hear her. 2.5 years later. Sarutobi had seen everything from peaceful times, to chaotic times, to war time, but the last few years since the Kyuubi attack he'd seen a mix peace and chaos that usually centered around one certain blonde, Uzumaki Naruto. He'd feared that allowing her to join the academy at 4 was a bad idea. No sane person would allow it. It was probably one of the youngest admitted children since the birth of Konoha, yet he'd seen the good it had done her. Naruto was happier. She had social skills, though not many friends considering most in the village that were not shinobi still couldn't see beyond the nine-tailed Biju King. Most of the shinobi on the other hand had come around in 4.5 years, that was counting the time she'd spent in the academy. Sometimes it was hard for him to believe that little girl, obsessed with proving herself and her existence to those who hated her, and for a while there was that stubborn belief in a ramen god. She still obsessed and loved ramen even if she'd gotten past that other phase of worship, had grown up. Come soon she'd have officially been a genin for 3 years, though she and her team usually didn't count the year until her birthday. Naru was the youngest in the group, and it was true in more than one way as her birthday was in October, and Koji and Kasumi's were in May and June respectively. 2 years ago he'd been worried that the revelation of her parents, especially her father and the Kyuubi, would break the fragile girl in her heart. He'd been worried it had for a solid month, but soon she'd snapped back to her usual self, if not a tad more jaded. He sighed in regret for that loss of innocence. Now things were chaotic for a different reason. The Chunin exams were approaching fast, only a month away. Before him were the Jonin senseis, and he was especially curious about Uchiha Makoto's decision concerning Team 7. From what he'd heard and seen they were doing very well. Over 100 D-rank missions in 2.5 years, and nearly 100 C-rank missions. It may seem a lot at first glance, but having 2 years to accomplish this made it easier. They'd done quite well for a genin team of only 2.5 years. He was sure Makoto had noticed as well, and he knew she had wanted to enter them last year, but with the exam taking place in Iwagakure she'd felt it too much of a risk for the team. Especially with Minato's daughter on the team. If that missing nin was anything to go by, then there were quite a few who remembered Minato and were still bitter. So, he began, his pipe never leaving his mouth. I am sure you all know what this is about. It's that time of year once again. Would those who wish to enter their team step forward now? He was not that surprised when only 3 teams of 5 present stepped forward. 2 were genin teams from over 2 years ago, including Makoto, and the other was one from this last year's graduation. He was a bit concerned for the last team though. Team 11 had only been active for around 8 months now, but they did have the criteria to enter, so he allowed the newer Jonin sensei to nominate his team. Makoto was the last to step forward and speak. Hokage-sama, under the name of Uchiha Makoto, I nominate Team 7 for the exams. It was short, and to the point. He'd expect nothing less from an Uchiha. Especially when it came to business. I see, then here are the forms. You all know what to do from here, Hiruzen said. You're all dismissed, except you Makoto. I wish to have your team review a bit early this year. Makoto stopped her retreat, and nodded before coming to stand in front of the Hokage. Her hands behind her, and her back was straight. Currently she looked hardly anything like the laid-back, gentle housewife she was off duty. I take it things have gone well? He asked. Makoto relaxed a little, and nodded. They've come a long way since I've been their sensei, she said, smiling lightly. I think they were ready for this exam last year, but we both know sending our ninja to Iowa isn't exactly safe, even after so many years. For Naru, well, it's even less safe for her than others. Hiruzen nodded, completely in agreement with the woman. And your assessment of Team 7? He asked. Uchiha Koji, age 11. He's come into his Sharingan well, though he doesn't use it often. He is either too lazy to use it for every little thing, or like me he believes it to be a tool to use in times of need and not just to use it. I am happy to see he doesn't seem to rely on it like most Uchiha tend to do. Hiruzen hemmed at the news, but was also relieved to hear this. He heard quite a bit about the boy, seeing how close he and Naruto were. At one time he knew the girl had a small crush on the boy. Recently he'd noticed while Naruto seemed to still have a deep emotion for the Uchiha boy, it wasn't that of romantic intent. Maybe it could one day become so, given the proper situation, but he doubted it. Especially seeing as how close the other teammate, Inuzuka Kasumi, was becoming to Koji. Makoto continued after a moment. His ability with it, when he does use it, is quite advanced. Though it has not reached full maturity yet. Still only 2 tomos, I expect the third to show up any day now. He is also well on his way to mastering the family taijutsu, partially due to how often he helps Naruto with her own skills, and Kasumi as well. I think in years to come he could be considered a taijutsu specialist, if not in ninjutsu as well. He is definitely a front-line fighter in times of war, or on a mission. I see, the Sandaime said, and waved for her to continue her evaluation of Team 7. Inuzuka Kasumi, age 10, nearly 11. She has come a long way since the team started. In the beginning I feared she and Naruto would clash horribly, they didn't seem to like each other. Slowly over time I saw them coming together as friends. By the time their first C-rank mission ended I saw a bond form. Naruto and Koji have helped greatly in improving her impulse to charge in without thinking. Makoto stopped and took a breath. She actually thinks things through now before being brash, and her teamwork is exceptional. With her Ninken, Mizumaru, and with her teammates. At first it was mostly with Mizumaru, but slowly over the last 2 years I've worked with her on fighting with, and without her Ninken. She has also been studying medical ninjutsu, which she seems to have an affinity for. I'd say she could be great in many areas, but tracking and as a medic nin is where she prospers. Hiruzen smiled, he wasn't too surprised. He recalled that Kasumi's father was an Inuzuka, but her mother was the older sister of Nohara Rin, one of the students of Minato Namikaze, and teammate of Hitaki Kakashi. Things had truly ended terrible for that Team 7, he just hoped the cycle wouldn't repeat. The point was, like Rin, Kasumi seemed to be flourishing under instructions as a field medic, as he recalled Tsunade had called her idea of having a medic nin on each team, before the council decided they didn't like the idea. It hadn't stopped Hiruzen from trying to place someone with promise as a medic nin on each team expected to pass. And Naruto? He asked, leaning forward some in curiosity of what she'd say. Makoto smiled once more at mention of her team. Uzumaki Naruto, age 8, nearly 9. Of both my other 2 students, I think Naruto has improved the most. She is truly deserving of the title, Prodigy. She has begun to use the Kage Bunshin, which she learned last year as you know, but of course she knew the jutsu and seal for it before she ever attempted it. She shows intelligence and some strategic ability, but Koji is the strategist of the team. Makoto once again stopped to catch her breath, a small smile on her face. She seems to know how to use the Kage Bunshin in her training, she seems to use them to help her chakra control, and taijutsu the most. She's come a long way with her family styles, and I can personally say having seen both Kushina and Minato fight that she's near mastered both styles as much as she can without knowing her elemental affinity. Makoto recalled both telling her what made their styles so deadly at full mastery was blending their affinities with it, especially Kushina's style since it was made around the idea of merging one's affinity, mostly lightning since it was the most common for an Uzumaki to have. Kushina had a strong water affinity though, with a secondary lightning affinity. So while she'd changed the Uzukan style to incorporate this, it was mostly the same. Minato had decided after mastering the Kazekin to blend his wind affinity with his taijutsu style, even if it wasn't a step in the family taijutsu scroll. It had been influenced by Kushina, much like his Rasengan had been influenced by the Bijudama. She's begun to create her own taijutsu style, a blend of both, which I think she'd subconsciously been doing for years now. The style once complete will be deadly, especially if she does find a way to make the style fluid with the Uzumaki Kenjutsu style, much like Kushina was able to. She seems to be determined to do so, And as unpredictable as Naru is, I don't doubt her, Makoto said, smiling slightly. Hiruzen smiled as well, nodding. Yes, she is every bit her parents' daughter. I gave her her mother's katanas last year on her birthday, as you know, he said, and Makoto nodded. Yes. As for other areas, she only knows a handful of ninjutsu, mostly her clones. She seems to have a knack with ninjutsu though, probably because of being in Uzumaki and Namikaze. We both know Kushina and Minato were ninjutsu and fuinjutsu specialists, though both were well versed in other areas. She is also adept at seals, much like her parents. Given her heritage, I am not surprised. Naruto is much like Koji, a frontline fighter, and I believe she could even be a great leader given time. I think, though it is odd, that she could be a master in many areas. Ninjutsu, Kenjutsu, Taijutsu, maybe even Fuinjutsu one day. As for the ones she shows the most promise, I'd have to say Ninjutsu and Kenjutsu. Taijutsu and Fuinjutsu following close behind. Makoto shrugged and finished. As I've said, she's a bit of a jack of all trades when it comes to those four areas, but she seriously lacks in Genjutsu, and while her chakra control has improved, she'll never be able to fully control it. A very powerful team, he said, smiling. They remind me a little of my old team, but they seem to work together a little easier than the Sanin ever did in the beginning. I have very little doubt they are ready for this, Hokage-sama, Makoto said. Even if they are not promoted, I have seen them enough to know they are low chunin level, if not a high chunin by this point. Good, Hiruzen said, nodding. I wish your team the best of luck, Makoto, dismissed. Makoto nodded, bowed in respect, and left the Hokage's office. She had no idea that this trip to Sunagaku for the Chunin exams would set into motion an event 4 years into the future. If it would lead to a happy ending for two certain Jinchuriki. Well, that counted on the actions of Naruto herself, along with Sabaku Gara. It's so hot, sensei. A almost agonized voice said, dragging the so on profusely. The voice belonged to an average-sized girl, with burgundy eyes and deep crimson hair which fell a few inches past her shoulders, almost to her shoulder blades. She wore her normal clothes, though over the years they'd become a deeper crimson. Similar to her hair, she also wore a large crimson scarf, which was half over her mouth and nose, but still allowed her to breathe. Much like all the genin and senseis journeying to Suna wore. The desert winds whipped against them, blowing up the golden-looking sand. It was of course the main reason for the scarf, and the sun beating down on them wasn't much better for those used to the more clam climates of fire country. Beside the crimson-haired girl was another girl, shorter than her and younger looking. Her hair was long, and nearly perfectly straight. It reached just past her waistline, and was a bright sunset blonde color. Her bangs on the right side were pulled back by 2 black clips. Her skin was lightly tanned, and she had intense cerulean eyes that looked older than her years. Her clothes were also changed from when she was younger. She now wore a almost burnt orange kimono-like blouse with black stitching along the hem and only one sleeve. A black obi, with the Uzumaki spiral on the left side below the obi. She wore a black skirt under the orange blouse, which was not much past her mid-thighs. Though not seen, there was an even shorter pair of black shorts under the skirt, so she didn't go around flashing her panties as she fought. A few inches below the skirt was long black tights, and black shinobi sandals on her feet. She had 2 hip pouches to her left, and 2 black shuriken holsters on her right upper and lower thigh area, placed against bandages which were wrapped underneath. Once again, it was a lot like her mother's outfit at 13, yet she had taken a few of the outfits. Many shinobi had multiple copies of the same clothes. Her mother was no exception, and dyed them a darker orange which was still rather bright. She had also used the little skills she had in sewing to hem them to her size. She, like the others, had a scarf, but hers was a dark blue. It kept most her facial features hidden from view, otherwise everyone would have noticed exotic-looking whisker birthmarks on either cheek. A boy with distinct features, very dark onyx hair, and dark gray eyes which appeared black at times was beside her. Wearing a high-colored dark blue shirt, black knee-length shorts, bandages along his arms from hands to elbow, and around his ankles to his shins. Black shinobi sandals were on his feet, and like both girls, a Konoha Hittite was proudly displayed around his forehead. He wore a black scarf to help against the sand and wind. We'll be reaching Suna within a few hours now, Kasumi, an older woman who looked similar to the dark-haired boy said. She too had long black hair, but her eyes were black. She also had a scarf much like the others, but in a midnight blue color. It's not that bad, Kasumi, Naruto said, smiling slightly over at the crimson-haired genin. Truth be told, it was hot. Naruto knew this. She just wasn't as affected as the others seemed to be. She thought maybe it had something to do with the Kyuubi. Actually, she liked the area, even if it was very, very different from Konoha. You're joking, Kasumi deadpanned, and Mizumaru barked from in front of her, his tongue lolling out of his mouth from the heat. Koji grunted, and that seemed all that he would say presently. Odd, he was usually not so Uchiha-like. The heat must have really been getting to him. Makoto chuckled at her three genin, and shook her head. We'll be there soon, so don't get too worked up, she said. Once we arrive and check in, we'll head to the hotel to cool off. Once we're inside Suna, it won't seem as hot as it does in the open desert. So it'll be cool, Makoto-sensei? Kasumi asked, hopeful. No, Makoto said, withholding a snort of amusement. It'll still be hot, but it's not as hot. I've been to Suna a few times in the past, it takes some getting used to. Kasumi sighed, but nodded. Naruto wasn't quite sure what to think. The month before, she'd found out about the Chunin exams, and Makoto having nominated them. They were to meet at the gates on a certain day, and she told them once they'd arrived that if one hadn't shown up, then none could have gone. The first test, so to say, was if they all showed up. They had. Now here they were, only an hour or two from Suna. As the blonde walked further along with her team, two other teams close by, she couldn't help but feel as if this trip was going to be something she recalled for many years to come. She felt as if something or someone important was waiting in Suna, but the feeling was so foreign she couldn't truly tell what it meant. She didn't notice one of the naturally redder strand of her hair floating up as the wind blew against them, and shining a familiar red in the sunlight. It would be symbolic in the future, even if she didn't know it. Much as her mother's own hair had helped tie her to a certain future Yondaime Hokage over 10 years before Naruto's birth. The three teams of genin from Konoha arrived nearly 3 hours later, close behind a team that wore headbands with an arrow-like symbol. Makoto told them they were from a minor village, Takigakure, the hidden waterfall village. Welcome to Suna, one of the guards at the entrance to the village greeted after their papers were all given. Wow, Kasumi said in awe as she looked around at the sand-like structures which made pretty much everything. It's so different, yet beautiful, Naruto supplied, looking just as odd as her friend. She had never been out of the village before they began doing C ranks, unlike her teammates, and this was the farthest she'd ever gone out of Konoha. She'd never been to such a diverse place before, and she really did find it beautiful. Maybe a bit sandy, but she didn't have much of a problem with sand. Koji agreed, nodding as he took in the sights as they walked through the village leisurely. Sensei, Kasumi began, looking over to their calm sensei. Is there no plant life in Suna? Makoto frowned. Not exactly. There are desert plants, you are aware, but there aren't plants as we know in Suna or most of Wind Country. Most? Koji inquired, looking up to his distant cousin with an raised eyebrow. You'll find out in time what I mean, Makoto said, almost in a mischievous manner. Koji looked about to say something when there was a loud rumble. Blinking owlishly, the three older members of Team Makoto turned to look at Naruto, who had her face flushed nearly completely red, her eyes almost glaring at the sand on the ground she walked. I'm hungry, she muttered. Her teammates and sensei sighed, sweat dropping. Mizumaru jumped from Kasumi's side to Naruto's and barked in agreement. Mizu-chan seems to be as well, Kasumi mused, smiling slightly. So what should we? Ramen. Naruto yelped excitedly, and Koji's left eye twitched. You eat too much ramen, Naru, he said, shaking his head. You're going to be very short if you don't eat other things as well. Naruto huffed, crossing her arms. I eat other things, she protested. Makoto laughed. Well, unfortunately she won't find ramen in Suna. We'll stop and get some sandango, it's a delicacy around here, Makoto said. Kasumi and Koji sighed at the prospect of not choking down more ramen for what felt like the dozenth time in the past week. Naruto just pouted slightly, but followed her sensei with the rest of the team to the place that had this certain type of dango. As she walked past people she couldn't help but be amazed by how no one seemed to look at her with those eyes, the eyes she was so used to and hated with every fiber of her being. She smiled, she was beginning to like Suna even more. Oh, sorry. She gasped after bumping into someone who was around the same height as her, but looked a little frailer, or maybe it was just the paler skin tone and sad look about him. She turned her head to look back at the person she'd bumped into, a boy who from the looks of it who had stumbled but not fallen and continued to walk. As she gazed at him he turned as well, his eyes making her own widen at the sharp aquamarine color that pierced through her cerulean orbs. They were so sad, so familiar, yet at the same time held shock, surprise, and slight fear in their wide orbs. She didn't get to see him long, but his eyes were burned into her mind as she had to turn to keep up with her team, and he was lost from her sight in the crowd. The exam didn't start for 3 more days after they arrived, so the teams could arrive and settle into a routine of sorts. Many teams explored. Naruto noticed this quickly, and while she and her team did some exploring they also stayed in their hotel room. They played card games, and even trained in Naruto's case, her chakra control that was. Kasumi always thought the blonde trained too much, that one day she'd hit a brick wall and it'd blow up on her and cause injury to herself. Or at least train herself into chakra exhaustion, which being a medic nin, though she was still in training she knew quite a bit after nearly 3 years, she knew was dangerous and unhealthy. Koji was so used to the pace of training Naruto set for herself he wasn't too concerned. Kasumi did notice he kept an eye on Naruto at nearly all times though, something which had always spawned jealousy in Kasumi. She hated to admit it, but the lazy Uchiha had always intrigued her and she found herself hopelessly falling for him. She knew Naruto had a sort of crush on him at one point, and might still have lingering feelings of more than friendship for him. At times she thought Koji felt the same, yet at others there was only deep friendship and a sibling bond between them, or so it seemed. Kasumi was really unsure how to categorize them, but she knew she couldn't stop her own feelings. Sometimes it seemed as if Koji returned those feelings, but at others, well, the Uchiha boy was beginning to give her whiplash and it was getting annoying. I'm so bored, Naruto said, her head thrown back to look up at the ceiling as she threw her cards down with a growl of frustration. I have no luck today, this is just annoying. Koji snickered as he drew the small pile of money towards himself and smirked. We could have played strip poker, he said, and flinched when both his female teammates glowered at him with auras of killer intent. Naruto's hair beginning to stand up like 9 tails. Something he still didn't know how she did, or if it was just some sort of oddity she inherited somewhere. He couldn't decide who was scarier, Kasumi with her feral killing intent or Naruto with her similar yet suffocating one. Both were intense, that was for sure. Not on your life, perv, Kasumi said dryly. Naruto stood. I'm going to go out, maybe get something to eat, she said. Give me some money, Kokun. Why? Use your own money. Naruto's eye twitched as she glared at her best friend. I would, but someone won all of it, she snapped. Besides, I'm bringing back food for us all, so fork it over or be neutered. Your choice. She said this all too sweetly. Kasumi hid a snicker behind her hands, and Koji shivered as he threw some of the money at his friend who smiled and stuffed it into a frog wallet she seemed to love so much. It was ironic because Naruto wasn't all that fond of the amphibians because of a prank he and Sasuke had pulled on her in revenge for putting pink hair dye into their shampoo, a miracle it was only them to be hidden, not everyone in their house. Thankfully it was not permanent, didn't make them any happier though. Uchihas did not have pink, shudder, hair. You know, it's odd. How often does she lose when we play games? Kasumi asked once their blonde friend left. Koji snickered. Almost never, but she has her days, he said as he placed his remaining money away. So, what do you think she'll bring back? Kasumi sighed. I don't care, as long as it's not ramen. Mizumaru barked in complete agreement from the bed where he laid contently. Naruto held the bag of food in her hands as she took the long way around back to the hotel. She wasn't sure why, but she really enjoyed taking in the sights even if they all seemed identical at first glance. Maybe it helped that no one knew who she was here, no one looked at her with those eyes that made her want to claw their eyes out, as morbid as that was. Run. Naruto stopped short as she was about to pass through a small playground. She was nearly knocked down by running kids around her age, maybe a little older. Looking around she saw the look of fear and desperation to get away, she'd seen that look before. It made her stomach drop, but this look couldn't be because of her. Hey, don't stand here and wait for the monster, he'll get you too. A boy said as he passed by her, and Naruto was shocked by his words. She ignored him and the others passing by, and began walking closer. She saw a girl running towards her, though she was not as fast as her friends, probably because of the sand snaking around her ankle. Naruto blinked and followed to trail to a boy with wide eyes, sad eyes. Eyes she remembered from the mirror, yet his were this pale clear sea foam green color, or aquamarine. The perfect reflection of a pale mix of green and blue. He had his hand held out, as if to stop the girl from running, but she didn't think he was doing this on purpose. The sand that was. Hey, she began to run to help the girl. Mostly she wanted to help the boy with the darkish auburn red hair which fell around his face in a shaggy-like appearance. Before she could get there, sand began to shoot towards the girl now on the ground, but another body intercepted. A man with shoulder-length blonde-brown hair. Gara, she heard the man mutter, and the boy looked shocked before he then looked down defeated. The little girl suddenly stood and took off, running past Naruto without looking back. She noticed the ball which had rolled away from Gara was not far from where she stood, about a foot behind the man who'd appeared, and walked forward. She heard a gasp when she passed the man, but the boy didn't seem to notice anything. Placing her bag of food down, she picked up the ball and walked closer to the boy. She wondered if Gara was his name or just something the man had said. It made more sense that it would be his name. Wait! She heard the man call as she got closer. She was a few feet away from the red-haired boy when she smiled and tossed the ball lightly towards him. Huh! The boy muttered as he caught the ball on instinct. Looking up, he saw a girl in front of him, smiling lightly at him. It was nothing like he was used to, and his gut twisted oddly. She had long sunny blonde hair which seemed to have reddish highlights that had to be natural. She was lightly tanned, and petite, maybe a few centimeters shorter than him. Her eyes were the brightest blue he'd ever seen, and held something familiar behind them, but they showed no hate, disgust or fear for him. The most odd feature, and most interesting to Gara, was the 3 whisker marks on each cheek. Naruto likewise was taking in the boy's appearance. His eyes were more unique up close than she'd imagined. But they showed very little emotion that wasn't loneliness and a darkness. They reminded her painfully of her own eyes before she'd made bonds with her friends. His skin was rather pale, and he was almost delicate looking but definitely male. She now realized his eyes, something that made them so very unique, had these black rings around them reminding her of a tanuki. She couldn't help but think it cute. Would you like to play? She asked, and the boy's eyes widened. Play? He echoed, blinking slowly. You aren't afraid of me? Naruto smiled wider, and shook her head laughing. Why would I be afraid of you? She asked. I'm Naruto, Uzumaki Naruto. I'm here for the Chunin exams, I'm from Konoha. Gara wasn't sure how to reply. This was the first person besides Yoshimaru who wasn't afraid, and yet he'd just hurt Yoshimaru with his sand. She had to have seen it, so why was she asking him to play with her? He was also surprised she was a ninja, but the hit I ate proved she was. She didn't look any older than him though. What's your name? That man, he said. Gara, is that you? She asked, tilting her head slightly. Gara nodded, still holding the ball in his hands. I'm Sabaku Gara, he said, and his lips twitched some as if to smile, but he wasn't positive how to. Gara, a voice said from behind, and both turned to find Yoshimaru having approached. His arms were lowered to his side, but both children could see the blood from where the sand had hit his forearm area. Gara looked down regretfully and Naruto looked concerned. She now saw there was a resemblance between this man and Gara. She wondered if he was a brother, father, or uncle. Maybe a cousin if nothing else. It was mostly in some facial features, the resemblance. He had much lighter hair, a blonde brown, and his eyes were much darker, a somewhat dull indigo color. Yoshimaru, Gara muttered, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I know, Gara, Yoshimaru said, smiling. Turning to the girl at his nephew's side, Yoshimaru was struck by the bravery and kindness the girl had shown Gara. Even foreigners, who would have witnessed Gara like that, and he was sure she had, would have run terrified. But she didn't. Looking into her bright blue eyes, he was struck by an eerie similarity they held to Gara's. They looked much older than her years. She couldn't be older than Gara, maybe even younger, as Gara was 9 and she hardly looked the same age. The fact she had a Konoha Hitai 8 surprised him. He hadn't realized they graduated so young anymore since the Third Shinobi War. Hello, I'm Yoshimaru, Gara's uncle, he introduced himself. You're here for the Chunin exams then? He asked. Naruto nodded. Yes, I'm Uzumaki Naruto, she replied. Do you need any help? One of my teammates knows some medical ninjutsu, she can help you heal. Yoshimaru was again surprised by how much older she sounded as she talked. Thank you, but I must decline. It's not that bad a wound, I'll take care of it once home, he said, smiling. Naruto nodded and looked over at Gara. Can I play with Gara for a little while? I mean, if it's not too late today. Gara looked hopeful, more hopeful than Yoshimaru had ever seen his almost stoic nephew. I'm afraid it's getting late today, Naruto-san, he began. But tomorrow, if you wish to meet Gara here, that is fine. Gara looked at the blonde beside him and Naruto had to control the urge to hug the boy at how hopeful his pastel eyes looked. She grinned, one of her rare true grins. Tomorrow, around noon, if that all right, Gara. I'll meet you here and maybe after we can have lunch as well. She told him, and walked back to her bag and picked it up. Coming back towards Gara and Yoshimaru, she saw Gara smiling so softly you'd have to really be looking to notice it, and Yoshimaru was smiling a bit as well. Bowing lightly to Yoshimaru, she waved at them as she began heading back to the hotel. For some reason she couldn't help but think about the red-haired, sea-foam-eyed boy. Naruto made good on her promise to Gara. She met him the next day minutes before noon. She wasn't all that surprised to find him in the same place on the swing, and that he had the teddy bear she'd seen yesterday with him. Now, someone else might think this laughable, a boy her age carrying around a teddy bear, but she didn't. She had a feeling that bear was the only company he really had besides Yoshimaru. It sort of reminded her of her fox, which she no longer carried around but still had in her room. That fox had been her only friend once upon a time, before she'd become a ninja. Unfortunately, She only had one day to spend with him. The following day was the beginning of the Chunin exams, but she'd promised to make as much time as she could to see him. It wasn't charity or pity, it was understanding. Gara was like her, and she knew from experience she would have given anything to have a friend. She'd been lucky to find the ones she had now. I'm glad you three made it, Makoto-sensei said as they entered the Suna Academy. I was concerned you'd get lost. Nope, Kasumi said, smiling. Naru-chan asked her new boyfriend. She trailed off, her smile was teasing, and her eyes mischievous while Koji covered a laugh with a cough. Naruto blushed deeply, and glared half-heartedly at her friends. He's just my friend, she said, looking back to Makoto who seemed amused. Gara showed me where it was this morning. She hadn't been sure she'd find him this morning, but thankfully he'd been there waiting for her. Well, maybe not waiting for her exactly, but he'd been there, and seemed only slightly surprised to see her. She'd gotten a quick brunch with him. The exams didn't start till around 2, so she had a few hours, and asked him about where exactly the academy was. He'd showed her after they'd eaten and then she'd taken him to meet her teammates. It was brief but went better than she'd hoped. What continued to annoy her to no end was the looks Gara received. It had taken her only a few minutes to realize they were the same as the ones she reviewed back home. She didn't want to pry though, and so she never asked. I'm glad you're getting along here, Makoto said, and motioned for them to continue in. Go on, and good luck. Team 7 nodded and with one quick glance at each other entered the room. The first thing Naruto noticed was the papers on each desk, and she saw the words written on the board up front, written exam. Kami, I'm doomed. She felt herself shrivel inside at the realization she had to take an exam. For every bit of intelligence she had, and as great a ninja she was, written exams were never her strong point. She wasn't sure why, but she just didn't do too well under the pressure of a written test. You'll do fine, she heard Kasumi say beside her. She's right, Koji added, nodding. Looking at both her friends, she smiled and nodded. Right, I'll pass this stupid test, Datbane. Matsunaga Kato was the unfortunate soul roped into being a proctor for the second half of the Chunin exam. Usually he was more than happy to be elsewhere. On a mission or even watching as some of the genin teams hoping for promotion floundered around like fish out of water. There were never many promotions when exams were held in Suna, mostly because of the drastically different climate to other countries. Looking around at those that remained, he shook his head, snorting. 57, Yoshida, he asked the proctor for the first exam, who shrugged. That's what I got from 90 hopeful, Yoshida said, and Kato nodded and glared at the group of genin. Alright, listen up. This next test will be outside Suna, so you have an hour to pack essentials in one bag, no more no less, and meet me at the gates. With that the man shunshined away, shocking those few who didn't recognize the technique and others because they didn't expect the proctor to simply leave. Yoshida's eye twitched as the genin stayed seated for a minute or two, and he sighed. What are you waiting for, brats? He yelled. Go. It was instantaneously that the genin shot up and left, heading back to their hotels to pack a bag for the second part of the exam. So, what do you think? Koji asked while they headed back to their hotel. Mizumaru barked 3 times and Kasumi nodded as if she understood the Ninken, which she did being an Inuzuka. Right, you are Mizu-chan, she said. We should separate what we pack concerning our strengths. I'll handle medical, and you and Naru-chan can handle the brute force and intelligence. Koji nodded along with Naruto. That sounds good, Naruto said. Since I can make storage scrolls, one can carry more than you two. I figure we won't need to go all out though, and I'll be sure to bring a few blank scrolls in case we need them and tags as well. With a plan in mind, the 3 entered their hotel room to ready themselves. The proctor, Matsunaga Kato, looked at them all as they stood at the gates, all with bags somewhere on their person. Beside the proctor was 4 others. 3 had bags in their hand and the other was simply there. Alright, first things first, these are waivers. You all must sign them or back out now. Be warned, if you do back out your team is disqualified. What's the waivers for? A genin from what looked like the waterfall village asked. Kato smirked and snickered as he handed the waivers to the jonin beside him to hand out. Your deaths, he said bluntly, causing many to gasp, shriek, or back away shocked. What? Nearly all the genin yelled, and Kato snickered louder. Calm down brats, he said, shaking his head. This exam isn't child's play. Shinobi way of life is life or death most the time, there is no room for hesitance. Those waivers are basically forms saying if you die in this exam then Suna isn't responsible for it. So, you expect us to kill each other? A genin from Suna asked. It's unavoidable. This next phase of the exam is a battle royal of sorts, he began. You will be taken to a place not far from here, which borders one of the dividers between Wind Country and the next country over, known as Area 51. It's the only place that isn't completely desert land in Wind Country. Kato stopped there and looked at the genin before continuing. You will trade your waivers for a coin from one of these 3 jonin, he said pointing out the 3 beside him with the bags. Each coin is different, they have different symbols. Wind, heaven or earth. You must collect one of each and make it back to Suna in 6 days. If one of your team is dead upon arrival you are disqualified. If you do not have all 3 coins then you are disqualified. If you don't make it back in time the same applies. Can we make alliances with other teams? Kato snorted and shrugged. If that's what you want, but it'd be sort of foolish if you have different coins. And even if you do, even comrades can turn on one another, he said. So, come get your coins. The one who passed out your waivers will take them back and blindfold you, seeing as we can't have you little genin seeing what direction we go in. Well, Kato said a minute later, raising an eyebrow. Get to it. That was all that was needed for everyone to begin moving. So, what do we have? Koji asked, sitting against a tree not too far from where they'd been dropped an hour earlier. Naruto pulled the coin from one of her waist pouches and turned it over. It was silver and the symbol was that of wind. Wind, she said. So what should we do? I'm pretty sure given the thickness of the forested area we're pretty deep inside. Mizumaru barked, from where he sat by Kasumi's side. The closer to the exit of this dry place the more sand we should see, Kasumi said. Did anyone pack a map? I did, Koji said, pulling it from his bag. Though this place, Area 51, may not be on it for all we know. Naruto shrugged, putting the coin back in her pouch. We have to try, and Suna is nearly in the middle of Wind Country and they said it was only an hour or 2 out, she said and then sighed. The problem is in which direction did we go? Kasumi bit her lip. Mizumaru may be able to track a scent back to the village. Ours or otherwise, but with so many shinobi about in the wind, heat and sand, it won't be easy. Mizumaru whined, and his ears flattened against his head in agreement of her partner's words. Koji sighed, shrugging. Getting out is one thing, but getting the other 2 coins. Koji began and stopped suddenly when they heard rustling. Naruto's eyes widened, ducking just in time for a kunai to fly past and bury itself into the bark of a tree where her head once was. You don't need to worry about that, a voice said, and 3 genin stepped out from their hiding places. We will be taking your coin, Konoha-nin. There were 3, all dressed in darker colors and some form of camo in odd places in blue and white. Their hitayates were of Kurigakure. Kasumi, Koji began, and they all stood ready for a fight. Be ready as backup with Mizumaru. Kasumi nodded, her eyes narrowed. Right, she said. Naru, what do you think? He asked, looking over at her to find her in her more common Uzumaki clan style. We go wild, she said, and flashed a bright smile before becoming serious again. Pathetic. One of the Kiri genin spat. What are you blondie? 6. Naruto's eyes grew dark as she gritted her teeth. I'm nearly 9, Bane. She growled. Wasting no more time, she jumped back to put more space between her and them, and threw shuriken at the Kiri Nin. That was all it took to begin the fight. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu, fire release. Great fireball technique. Koji said, and wasn't too surprised when the male genin he faced sent a surprisingly strong water jutsu back. K. You'll have to do better than da, Ak. The genin said, and he was hit from behind by Mizumaru. Meanwhile, Naruto faced two of the genin who had decided to gang up on the pretty blonde, as one of the male Kiri genin had told his teammate, a girl with short black hair and cold brown eyes. Naruto was good, and at first had the upper hand as she used her agility to block, dodge, duck, jump and anticipate her enemies' moves, but that got harder as they showed just how skilled they were at working together. Never seen a girl with whiskers before, the male said, smirking. Wonder if she's one of those bloodline freaks. The female sneered, and used Naruto's moment of distraction to nail her in the gut and place her kunai against her neck harshly, drawing a line of blood. Has to be, I mean look at her, the girl sneered, digging the kunai deeper against the blonde's neck. No one has marks like that and is human. Naruto's eyes widened, feeling blood trail down from the still shallow wound, and she gasped at those words, words of villagers coming back to her. Not human. Demon brat. Kitsune bitch. Get out demon, no one wants you. Can't be human, not with marks like. Let go of her. Kasumi snapped as she punched the girl holding Naruto in the side of the head, a kunai drawn. The girl was forced to let her go, and Naruto backed up slowly. Then she glared at the remaining genin, the male. Futon. Repusho, wind release. Gale palm. Naruto said after going through seals at a fast pace. The genin was hit by the violent wind and knocked back into his teammate who was fighting Koji and Mizumaru. Bitch. The genin said, and Naruto snorted. Give us your coin, Koji said as the girl Kasumi had been fighting hit the ground next to her teammates. Or me and Naru will show you something we've been working on for a while. If you're lucky you'll live. You'll have to kill us, bloodline trash, one of the males spat noticing Koji's Sharingan eyes. How about, not, Kasumi said holding ninja wire and giving one end to Mizumaru. It was no time before the three genin were bound together by the near-invisible strands of wire. AHHG, when we get out of here you're dead. The girl cried, struggling. Kasumi snorted and walked forward, searching through the genin's pockets and pouches for the coins. Her face was a mask of concentration in case they tried something. Found it, Kasumi said, holding up a silver coin and turning it slowly with a smirk. Earth. Datbane. Naruto cheered, jumping up, her fist hitting air in her mini celebration. We should go now, we need to find the last coin. Kasumi, who had walked over to hand the coin to Naruto, nodded, and Koji grabbed his bag after stuffing the map back inside. Don't walk away from us, one of the genin said after getting free of the wire. The Kiri Nin headed straight for Team 7 who were about to leave with a long thick sword in hand. Koji and Naruto were the first to react, and on instinct went into hand seals. Kaden. Ruka no Jutsu, fire release, dragon fire technique. Koji called, and even though he didn't have a conductor of any sort for the jutsu to travel through, he knew Naruto's part of their combination attack would make up for it. Futon. Atsugai, wind release, pressure damage. Naruto said. The wind that was released was tornado-like. When it hit the fire from Koji's jutsu it was like a whirlpool tornado, or many waterspouts might be more accurate, were created and began heading towards the Kiri Nin. There was no escape for the three ninja, and Team 7 couldn't look away at the fiery masses which hit its target. There were short screams before nothing could be heard, but the smell was enough to bring tears to Kasumi and Naru's eyes. Koji fought any back the same reaction. If they were all three dead Naruto, Koji and Kasumi didn't know, but the one who'd tried to attack them definitely was. The chance anyone had survived that, especially being genin, was slim to none. You two did say that new attack you'd been working on was dangerous, Kasumi said, forcing down bile. The three had killed before, being genin for so long it was rather unavoidable. Those had been bandits though, having done C ranks other than the first C rank which was more B rank than C rank once done and over with. We should go, Naruto said, forcing down her own emotions. That attack had taken her nearly half a year to master as well she had, and another 6 or so months to safely combine it with one of Koji's cadence for the combination they'd just done. It was also her most powerful wind jutsu, if not one of her favorites. Koji nodded and the three genin turned and ran in a direction they hoped would bring them closer to the third coin in the desert of Suna. I suggest you surrender, Naruto snapped, her eyes narrowed and cold as she held one of her mother's katanas, Toyotama Hime being the name etched into the blade below the hilt and guard, to the genin's throat. If the girl moved it would be all too easy to slide the blade through the front of her neck and out the back, or take off her head among other things. She had even been working on pushing her chakra nature into her weapon, though she didn't claim to be very good at kenjutsu just yet. She was good enough to make a point. Her nature type had been a surprise. Most people of Fire Country had fire affinities, though earth and water were not so unusual. To find she had a very strong wind affinity with a fairly powerful secondary lightning affinity had been a surprise. On the other hand, it had come as no surprise when Koji had a fire affinity, but the fact Kasumi had a water affinity had been slightly surprising. Inuzukas usually had earth or fire affinities. They don't have the coin, Naru-chan, Kasumi said, sighing as she finished checking the two knocked out sand genins on the ground. Look, you can have my coin, the girl said, holding her hands up in surrender. Naruto did not remove her blade though and looked to Koji. His charcoal eyes flashed as he nodded, and went about looking for the coin. He was careful to keep his hands from any part of the girl that would offend her. Naruto noticed how careful he was and had to withhold a snort of amusement, while Kasumi huffed and crossed her arms. Ah, there's two. An earth and heaven, he said while holding up the coins, and Naruto nodded. You'll let me go then. The girl was interrupted when the katana was removed with speed she barely made out, and then there was darkness. Naruto had stabbed her sword into the ground below her, and shot forward quickly to press a pressure point that would knock the girl out. It all happened within a span of a few seconds, rather slow in Naruto's opinion. The girl hadn't seen it coming though. Naru was still working on her speed though, and she wasn't slow by any means. Picking up the long katana, which had a green hilt with diamond-like designs in a gold color, the blade itself made from chakra-conductive metal, not exactly common for most katanas, she sealed it back into a scroll. Then placed it in one of the pouches on her thigh. It was amazing how with the right seal the smallest scroll could hold the largest item. Usually she would have simply held it at her waist with her black obi, but that would have given away an advantage in the exam. We never said that, Naru muttered to the unconscious girl. It was best to leave them unconscious so as to not have them attack when they went to leave. They'd learned that the hard way with the Kiri team. They also didn't want to go around killing every team they met, and they'd met 3 or 4 in the 3 days they'd been there. It must be the lack of ramen, makes her cranky, Kasumi said, shaking her head. Koji nodded. Well, we should head out now. I think given the sand around here we should continue in that direction. The sun should help us pinpoint exactly where we are and which way Suna is, Naruto said, her face very thoughtful. It was almost unusual for the blonde. Koji and Kasumi nodded, and the three began their trek back towards the deserts of Suna and the hidden village itself, with 3 days to spare. 2 days later Team 7 found their way back to Suna Gates, tired, hot, hungry, in need of water and injured. Compared to others returning or still out there they weren't too terribly hurt. Naruto was mostly tired, most her injuries healing much quicker thanks to her Uzumaki blood and the added bonus of being a Jinchuriki. Other than that, there was mostly some cuts and bruises. Kasumi had been able to heal the more serious injuries, and was probably the closest to passing out. So, a Konoha team, the proctor said when they got to the gate. You're the first team from your village here, congratulations on making it. Koji grunted, rubbing his left arm where one of the teams to attack them for their coins had nearly broken it. Here are our coins, Naruto said, holding out the 3 silver coins. Kato nodded, took the coins and handed them off. Good, you still have your original coin, he said, and all 3 members of Team 7 raised an eyebrow. What do you mean, Proctor-san? Kasumi asked. Kato smirked, and chuckled. Well, there was one part of the test I didn't mention. Teams who do not return with their original coin, the one with their team's chakra signature absorbed into it, are disqualified. What? All 3 exclaimed, Koji in a rather un-Uchiha-like manner. Yes, it's to see how seriously you genin take this part of the exam. You see, the coins are like a scroll. Sometimes a ninja will be tasked with carrying important scrolls, sometimes containing classified information between unified villages or even villages undergoing a treaty agreement. There will be enemies wanting to stop it, or take the scroll to read. If that happens, the mission is compromised, and if not recovered before opened, classed as a failure. Team 7 looked grim as they realized what he meant. So in other words, if we can't keep the scroll, or in our case the coin, protected until we reach the location of delivery, then clearly becoming a chunin isn't something we would be ready for, Koji said. Kato nodded, smiling lightly. Right, not many understood the point, and why we didn't tell you before you left. Naruto snorted, and said, clearly the exam isn't meant to be simple or easy, otherwise anyone could become a chunin. Right, Kato said. You should head in now. If you need medical attention, head for the hospital. Otherwise be ready tomorrow for the next phase of the exam. They nodded and the 3 genin and 1 ninkin walked through the gates, and headed for the hotel to relax and regain their strength from the last few days. Kato watched them go and looked at one of the jonin next to him. If those 3 don't become chunin, I'll be surprised, he said, and the jonin nodded, having thought the same thing upon their arrival and reactions to the news. The one with the coins chuckled on his other side, and Kato looked over to notice that the blonde hadn't given him 3 coins but 4. Well, I'll be damned, they managed to get 4 coins instead of the needed 3, he said, blinking in surprise. Gara was unsure if it was a good idea, showing up at Naruto's after hearing that the girl had finally arrived back in the village after passing the second exam. He wasn't sure how to explain his emotions over the last few days, or the day before it. She'd never showed any fear of him and even defended him once. It made the odd feeling in his chest change and his stomach twist at times. When he'd told Yoshimaru over the days she'd been at Area 51, he'd seemed surprised, but explained that the emotion he'd tried to describe sounded like concern or worry for the blonde. He did know he had felt happy to be able to see her again. Gara was pulled from his thoughts as the front door was opened by a familiar tan blonde, and he noticed she didn't wear the kimono blouse, obi, and skirt she usually did or any of her ninja gear. Instead, she stood in a black tank top with an orange swirl on the front, probably her clan symbol, and pair of orange shorts. Her hair was loose, completely, so the hair clip holding one side away from her face was removed and it made her bangs a bit more unruly, and almost spiky looking in places. Gara, Naru greeted, a smile coming across her face. I'm glad to see you. Gara smiled slightly as well, something he'd never truly done often before and still wasn't used to. In his hands was a brown paper bag, inside was medical creams he'd gotten with the help of his uncle. Holding it out to her, he sighed in relief when she blinked and took the offered bag. He had feared she might not, seeing as the last time he'd done something similar the door had been shut in his face. Medical creams, Naruto mused as she peeked inside, and then she smiled. Thank you, Gara. Koji, Kasumi and I were about to have dinner. Would you like to join us? Gara realized during the whole interaction he hadn't said a word and flushed slightly. If it's alright, he said. Naru chuckled, grabbed his hand in hers, and pulled him inside. He was surprised by just how warm her hand felt in his, or the simple fact his sand hadn't made a barrier between them. Even days after the fact, this still served to surprise him, since the sand usually stopped everyone from touching him. Sometimes it even stopped Yoshimaru, though he wasn't sure why the sand let him through sometimes and at others refused. Dot. In the end, only 8 teams passed the second phase, leaving 24 genin left. Congratulations on making it here, Makoto-sensei told them as they arrived at the stadium practically behind the academy. She was smiling in a proud manner, and Naruto, Koji, and Kasumi all smiled back, while Mizumaru barked twice in greeting. I'll be watching how this all goes. Good luck you three, she said, and walked over to stand with the other Jonin senseis that were there for their teams. The proctor from before was there, and Naruto also saw Gara and Yoshimaru not far behind, who she was sure was the Kazekage. The Kazekage had hair similar to Gara's dark red, yet was more brown at the same time. His eyes were darker, not the pale teal she liked about Gara's eyes, but Gara looked a lot like this man, leading her to believe he was his father. Smiling at Gara, who didn't seem to like being part of a large crowd and in sight of so many people, she waved and caught the pale eyes of her new friend. She saw his face light up marginally, and she wondered if anyone else would notice. The Kazekage did notice, and his eyes trailed from her wave towards Gara. She expected nothing less from a ninja. She noticed a small frown and quirked eyebrow at the interaction. The Kazekage looked at Yoshimaru, and muttered something before Gara's uncle nodded. She wasn't sure what was said, but she really couldn't be bothered to care. I wish to congratulate everyone who's made it to the final part, or at least semi-final part, of the exams. Unfortunately, there are still quite a few of you left, so there will be a preliminary fight that will decide who goes forward. The rules have not changed much when it comes to the fights. The waivers you signed hold up until the end of the exams, so killing is allowed, but unnecessary killing will be taken into consideration by those judging the exams. The proctor, the Kazekage, motioned to Kato, who nodded from where he stood. Will have the power to interfere if he deems it, and call a winner before fatal force is used. If you do not stand down and kill anyways, you will be disqualified. Fights will be chosen randomly, and show up on the board above the cage box. If there are no questions, then we will begin shortly, he finished. It was obvious the man was very business-oriented. He got straight to the point. No one bothered asking questions, it was obvious what was expected from them. Nodding, the Kazekage looked to Yoshimaru and Gara before going to the box above the stadium, which would be where the Kazekage sat with anyone else of importance, like the Wind Daimyo or the Kazekage's Anbu guards. It seemed Gara was also going to be up there with 2 other children, both of which she couldn't see well but seemed to want to be far away from Gara. Up above the stadium was a balcony-like place for the genins in the exam and Jonin senseis, and below that were seats for civilians and anyone wanting to watch the tournament. The board on the cage box began to roll at a fast pace before stopping on 2 names. Uchiha Koji vs Ryuichi of Kumo. Good luck, Kasumi said, smiling over at the dark-haired boy. Naruto added, ditto. Kick his butt, Ko-kun. Koji's lips quirked up in a small smile smirk, and he forced back an eye twitch from the shortened version of his name Naruto had come up with over the years. She didn't use it often, but when she did he always had the urge to twitch. He offered as a reply, and began his walk down to the stadium along with a boy with strange light blue hair, pale skin, and large pink eyes. A very strange individual indeed. He doesn't talk much anymore, does he? Kasumi muttered, half talking to herself. Naruto looked down. Some of her bangs not held back fell to shadow her face, and she thought of the reason for Koji's turn of emotions. Koji had suffered tragedy only months before, with his brother's supposed suicide. Koji had been unsure what to believe, but a strong part wasn't willing to believe his older brother had taken his own life. Some thought Itachi had killed his best friend, but that was something both she and Koji refused to believe. Naruto couldn't bring herself to believe either story. She'd known both Shisui and Itachi for years now. Something had happened, something which was now making Itachi act strangely, but she had no idea what. If Makoto-sensei did, she wasn't talking about it. Death is never easy to accept, she muttered, barely loud enough for Kasumi to hear. But Koji is strong, he'll be more like his old self given time. Kasumi bowed her head in understanding. She had heard of the death of Koji's older brother, it had shaken her friend and crush, but she wouldn't admit that to anyone other than herself, so badly she was becoming concerned he'd never be his lazy, laid-back self again. It had hurt Naruto nearly as much. Sometimes she forgot that Naruto viewed the Uchiha as an adopted family of sorts. She had none of her own, and Koji and the Uchiha, well, mainly Makoto-sensei's family and Koji's, though Naru was on good terms with the whole clan, were her first bonds. I hope so, Kasumi muttered, and both girls turned as the fight between their teammate and the other boy began. So, I want to get some information about some things out there. Once I've revealed Naruto's bloodline, I'll do the same for it. This is mostly for some techniques in her family taijutsu styles to keep everyone up to date and further explain it. Uzumaki clan. Uzuken equals Vortex Fist. The Vortex Fist taijutsu style has been in the Uzumaki clan for generations, since the founding of Uzushiogakure. Though it can be learned by the branch family members as well. The only reason the clan had a main family and branch family, similar to the Hyuga family, was to help keep the family tree straight. The Man family were the most close to the bloodline, while the branch family was mostly cousins and distant cousins, etc. It was also another way to organize the family head of the clan and the clan itself. The style relies on speed and agility, and was most suited for females of the clan. Though was adapted to work with only speed, if a member did not have the proper agility and flexibility because of their body type. It is more of an offense than defense, seeing as Uzumaki were masters of fuinjutsu, seals, and kenjutsu, weapons, depending on the clan member. It works hand in hand with pressure points, mixed with lightning release, which was the most common elemental affinity in the Uzumaki clan. Later it became even more capable as a defense when a member learned more of human anatomy and was able to find even more pressure points that could temporarily cripple or paralyze. Naruto herself has also added to the style, studying more about anatomy from medical scrolls to find a more in-depth search on pressure points. The style is even more offensive now thanks to the fact she found pressure points that could be fatal when hit, though she was sure it had not escaped Uzumaki's before, but for some reason they didn't believe the style needed to be more fatal. Namikaze clan. Kazeken equals Wind Fist. The Wind Fist was created by an unknown party of the once larger Namikaze clan at an unknown time in history, but was one of the few things not lost to the sole survivors of the main family when they migrated to Konoha. It is more of a defense, but can also be offensive to nearly the same degree. One of its greatest defensive and offenses is mixing wind chakra to increase speed and strength, something later added by Minato by watching his wife mix her affinity with her clan taijutsu. There is also a taijutsu ability called Kazeken, which while called the same as the taijutsu style is actually translated as wind blades. It takes a strong wind affinity and control, but is not classed as a ninjutsu because Minato had such control over his affinity he could use it similar to a Rasengan, without hand seals. It also uses very little chakra, but actual wind influenced by small traces of chakra. It is easier to master with a weapon, but can be done simply by movement of the hand. The drawback is it can cause injury to the one doing the technique if not mastered and careful. It is not to be done without near mastery of a wind affinity. Another thing that made it extremely effective and dangerous was the Hiraishin, which of course only Minato could truly do, having perfected the technique. Raijuken equals Thunder Beast Fist. Raiju was also a legendary creature from Japanese mythology. Its body is composed of lightning and may be in the shape of a cat, fox, weasel, or wolf. The form of a white and blue wolf, or even a wolf wrapped in lightning, is also common. It may also fly about as a ball of lightning. In fact, the creature may be an attempt to explain the phenomenon of lightning. Its cry sounds like thunder. Raiju is the companion of Raijin, the Shinto god of lightning. The Raijuken is the style created by Naruto, mixing her clan styles, and as such is very unpredictable. There is only a basic level for mastery, as one must master the Uzumaki and Namikaze styles completely to really get the full worth of the Raijuken. Once the basics of the equal mix of offense and defense, taken from the two styles, is mastered, the style relies on the mastery of the Uzuken and Kazeken to be effective, as said before. It was developed with the idea of mixing kenjutsu, so one would need an understanding of the art to use the style effectively, but it is not necessarily a requirement. The style is so unpredictable it can confuse the Sharingan so that it can no longer predict the movements nor copy the style. Toyotama Hime equals Katana Blade. A green hilt with diamond-like designs in a gold color, the blade itself was made from chakra-conductive metal, not exactly common for most katanas, and a white silk ribbon around the hilt close to the guard of the katana. The name of the sword is etched onto the silver-like blade close to the guard in kanji. Toyotama Hime, meaning luminous jewel, better known as Otahime, is a goddess in Japanese mythology. She is the beautiful daughter of Ryujin, the god of the sea. She married the hunter Hori and gave birth to a son, who in turn produced Emperor Jima, the first emperor of Japan. After giving birth, she turned into a dragon and flew away. Hitokiri equals Katana Blade. It looks nearly identical to Toyotama Hime, except it is a blood red with the same diamond pattern yet in ivory instead of gold, hilt blade, with a much darker blade, also made from chakra metal. Only the blade is not silver in hue, but closer to black, and has a partially serrated blade close to the guard of the sword, though the rest of the blade is not serrated. Instead of a white ribbon it has a pitch black one. The name of the sword is etched in gold on the sword's blade in kanji. Hitokiri means human slayer, though person slayer or man slayer are also pretty much accurate translations from what I can find. Sneak peek of one of Naruto's developed jutsus that will appear next chapter. Raiden. Raiko Kitsune, a Raiden lightning ninjutsu, created by Naruto. Most likely a B-rank ninjutsu, seeing as it is not usually fatal, but can harm and do some considerable damage with enough force and chakra. The hand seals are dragon, ox, tiger, snake, ox. It creates 3 large foxes made from lightning which attack the enemy given. If combined with a water attack can cause some serious damage, but as Naruto does not have an affinity for water and has never been able to use water jutsus right, she'd have to have a partner to use this combination. Much like the combination attack she and Koji created. And Chapter 11 Preview. Koji stared at his opponent without fear, though he was a bit nervous. He had confidence in his abilities, but he didn't know how this Kumo Nin worked, and he still only had 2 Tomo in his Sharingan after nearly 3 years of having it. He knew some Uchihas thought it rather odd, and shameful, mostly the elders of the clan for the latter. He suspected this boy might have some sort of bloodline, his coloring looked much too unique for him to be a normal ninja. Of course, he could be wrong. He knew there were some people with the most unique hair colors. Hitaki Kakashi had silver-white hair. The Haruno patriarch and his daughter, who he'd seen in passing since the daughter of the civilian clan seemed to follow Sasuke around quite often, had pink hair. That crazy Anko woman Shisui once told him about had purple hair, as did one of the Anbu, Neko cat, he'd seen keeping an eye on Naruto over the years. Ryuichi smirked as the proctor called the match to a start. Ready to lose? The blue-haired boy snarked, and Koji narrowed his eyes and fell into a stance. I was going to ask the same thing, Koji said, and smirked before making the first move. Some may think that was foolish, but Koji needed to know what the boy was capable of. What better way than to attack first? He just had to hope the Kumo Nin wasn't as skilled as his arrogant confidence boasted. Koji stared at his opponent without fear, though he was a bit nervous. He had confidence in his abilities, but he didn't know how this Kumo Nin worked, and he still only had 2 tomos in his Sharingan after nearly 3 years of having it. He knew some Uchihas thought it rather odd, and shameful, mostly the elders of the clan for the latter. He suspected this boy might have some sort of bloodline, his coloring looked much too unique for him to be a normal ninja. Of course, he could be wrong. He knew there were some people with the most unique hair colors. Hitaki Kakashi had silver-white hair. The Harunos, who he'd seen in passing since the daughter of the civilian clan seemed to follow Sasuke around quite often, had pink hair. That crazy Anko woman Shisui once told him about had purple hair, as did one of the Anbu, Neko cat, he'd seen keeping an eye on Naruto once over the years. Ryuichi smirked as the proctor called the match to a start. Ready to loose. The blue-haired boy snarked and Koji narrowed his eyes and fell into a stance. I was going to ask the same thing, Koji said, and smirked before making the first move. Some may think that was foolish, but Koji needed to know what the boy was capable of. What better way than to attack first? He just had to hope the Kumo Nin wasn't as skilled as his arrogant confidence boasted. Ryuichi was able to counter Koji's onslaught of punches, kicks and everything in between. But barely. Pulling back from the offense, Koji allowed Ryuichi the chance to go on the defense, if only to get an idea of his taijutsu style. You're pretty good, the blue-haired boy said, as his fist connected with Koji's forearm as he raised it to block. To Koji's surprise, the shock of the hit shook him, though he hit it well. It was almost as if his strength had increased upon the hit connecting, or maybe he'd infused chakra into the hit. He knew it was possible because one of the Sannin was famous for her super strength. Jumping back, Koji smirked and didn't even reply to the other genin's comment before he attacked again. Koji's fist was barely dodged by the blue-haired boy, who had twisted to the side at the last minute and launched his own attack with a kick to Koji's seemingly undefended back. This may have worked if not for the fact Koji was used to fighting a much faster and more agile fighter, that being Naruto whose style was much more honed than this boy's. There was also the fact that after nearly 3 years as a genin, there were only so many things Makoto-sensei could teach them that were low rank. While the training had consisted mostly on physical strengths and the ability to work together, there had been one jutsu they'd practically begged the older woman to teach them, though to go over everything learned might take more time than worth mentioning, so he didn't. Shunshin. Not common for genin to know, but not so uncommon either. But you can imagine the surprise the other boy felt when his foot didn't connect with Koji's back but air and leaves that hadn't quite disappeared yet. He's getting serious, Naruto noticed as she and Kasumi watched the fight with rapt attention. Mizumaru barked in agreement, and Kasumi bit her lip. He's getting really good with that Shunshin, she said, and Naruto chuckled. Yeah, but being his brother, did you expect less? Naruto asked, avoiding saying Shisui's name as it always brought a flash of lose and sadness to her heart when she did. Shisui had been known for his Shunshin, and Koji had been determined to be as good if not better than his brother when it came to the technique. It would be a while before he got there, but he was already one of the quickest with the jutsu. Her thoughts were only proven as Koji recovered from being punched in the gut and attacked Ryuichi again, only to use the Shunshin 3 times in quick succession to confuse and reach his target quickly. Koji's fist struck the blue-haired boy's cheek and sent him back skidding across the ground. He's doing well, isn't he? Makoto-sensei said more than asked as she came up behind her 2 students. Burgundy and Blue Eyes looked up at her and smiled, nodding. He is, but something is wrong. I mean, that hit should have affected Blue Boy more, Naruto said, frowning. I know from experience that Koji had a mean punch when he's going all out. Kasumi frowned as did Makoto. Blue boy, Kasumi questioned and Naruto flushed, looking down in embarrassment. I can't remember his name, sue me. Ryuichi panted slightly as he stood, running the back of his hand over his right cheek and mouth, where a small line of blood could be seen. You actually made me bleed, he said, smirking. Though I doubt you could have done any of that without those eyes of yours. Koji's Sharingan eyes glared, and he scoffed. Shows what you know. These eyes are just a tool, they're not the reason behind me being able to hit you. Koji clenched his right fist and winced at the pain that shot through and up his arm. It was almost as if he'd hit a brick wall. Ryuichi laughed. Well, you won't be able to do that again. You're not the only one with a bloodline, he sneered. His pink eyes flared for a moment before light transparent blue scales seemed to appear sparsely on his skin. It was almost not noticeable, but his Sharingan made them clearer. Seeing as others had gasped in the stands, it was noticeable even to normal eyes, but he doubted it was as noticeable to them as it was to someone with the Sharingan or possibly the Byakugan. Tatsusukuruden, or simply Tatsusukuru, Dragon Scale Release or Dragon Scale, my bloodline. Koji stilled his own shock and confusion. Truth be told, he'd never heard of a bloodline like that before and was weary. Was it only a defensive bloodline, or did it have offensive properties? I've never heard of a bloodline like that. Ryuichi smirked, and fell back into a stance, removing a oddly long kunai from his pouch. I'm an orphan, and the first with this bloodline. I named it myself, it's not known yet, so I'm surprised you haven't heard of it, he said. With this power, you have no chance, Uchiha. Koji removed a kunai from his own pouch and glared. He wouldn't lose, not even if the boy had an unknown bloodline. Enough talk, Koji said coldly, and the two moved at the same time to attack each other. Sparks flew as the two kunais collided. Is that even possible? Kasumi asked, eyes wide. A bloodline that's never been seen before. Naruto was also as shocked as her friend but shrugged. I can't see why not. I've read a bit about bloodlines, no one really knows how they began to start with. Though there is a supposed myth about how the Sharingan and Byakugan are offspring of the Rinnegan. Rinnegan? Kasumi questioned and Naruto shrugged. It's just a myth as far as the books are concerned. I'll give you the book I read about it in after the exams. Makoto smiled slightly and interrupted her two students. New bloodlines are known to pop up every now and then. The Yamanaka's bloodline is the newest in Konoha, and seeing as the third generation has inherited it since the original person to have it, it's passable by blood, hence it being a bloodline. Wait, you mean the Yamanaka's mind jutsus are a bloodline? Naruto asked. I thought those were just jutsus they created. Family secrets. Makoto shook her head. Many believe that at first, but anyone without the Yamanaka blood can't do them. The hand seal to activate it isn't even a normal seal. What happens if someone tries and isn't part of the clan? Kasumi asked, and regretted a moment later as Makoto smirked. And Uchiha tried copying it once back when the bloodline was new. He died, she said. The shock to his body trying to safely move his mind and soul to another killed him. Well, his soul and mind anyways. He was a vegetable, brain dead. His body died soon after. Kasumi and Naruto both shivered and focused back on the match. Koji looked worn out and was panting as he jumped back. The scales that covered his opponent left little area he could strike to wound. Unfortunately, the blue-haired boy didn't have that problem, and Koji had a few shallow cuts that they could see. Kaden. Goryuken no Jutsu, Fire Release. Great Dragon Fire Technique. Koji called, after going through the seals as fast as he could. It seemed Ryuichi wasn't expecting such a powerful fire attack, but then, neither was Naruto, Kasumi or Makoto. He's finally managed to do it, Kasumi said in awe. His most powerful Kaden Jutsu. Naruto smiled widely as she watched the dragon-shaped fire jutsu head towards the blue-haired boy, who tried to dodge only to not have time. Instead, the boy's hunched down, his arms crossed in front of him, his eyes seemed closed. As Koji moved quickly towards the boy who was trying to fend off the high-temperature flames with his own bloodline, or so it seemed, Naruto noticed his eyes. They were Sharingan red as expected, but instead of 2 tomos, there were 3 in each eye. He did it. Naruto gasped. His Sharingan, it's matured. Makoto smiled widely for once, having seen that development as well. Kasumi grinned, and pumped her fist into the air. Go Koji! She cheered. Koji's eye narrowed, though he had a faint smile as he heard Kasumi's cheer for him, and he seeing the fire fade, he used the Shunshin in quick succession. Or as quick as he could with the chakra he had left, that one fire jutsu having taken a little under half of what he had left. Not to mention he was using the Sharingan and it needed chakra to stay active. Appearing behind him, Koji noticed what he'd suspected before to be true. While the back of his neck was covered in defensive scales, much like most parts of his body, there were areas not protected. He'd been sure he'd seen an important area not protected during their fight. To anyone else it might not seem important, but having fought against Naruto for so long, you pick up a thing or two about anatomy and pressure points. Seeing Ryuichi about to turn, he acted as fast as he could and hit the pressure points with 2 fingers, and the boy's eyes widened and he fell face first onto the arena floor, his bloodline receding as he lost consciousness. Koji sighed, and backed away, allowing his Sharingan to fade back to dark gray eyes. Power from a bloodline or otherwise, doesn't mean a thing without skill, he said, even though the unconscious boy could not hear him. Winner. Uchiha Koji. Kasumi and Naruto both clapped along with many others of the crowd and met Koji on his way back to the competitors' area. Great fight, Ko-kun, Naruto said as she hugged the lazy clam boy along with Kasumi. Makoto chuckled at the picture it made, both girls having latched onto either of his sides to hug him, and Koji's eyes wide and a slight blush appearing on his cheeks. Lucky bastard, a genin whispered. Being hugged by 2 hot girls, and his teammates at that. Makoto rolled her eyes at the maturity of some of the other genin from other teams, and Naruto and Kasumi had finally pulled back with smiles. Thanks, Koji muttered, stuffing his hands into his pockets. By the way, Naru-chan, thanks for that last move. I don't think I would have won without it. Huh? Kasumi asked, blinking. Naruto laughed. Don't mention it, she said, knowing what he meant, having seen him using one of her moves to knock the boy out. That last move, I used pressure points to knock him out. I got lucky, it was one of the few areas not protected by his scales. I figure there was other areas, but I couldn't last much longer. That Kaden really drained me of chakra. Makoto smiled. I could see that. You did great out there, Koji. You've come far with your Kaden jutsus. It's not often a genin can control a B-rank jutsu. Team Makoto turned back towards the arena as the board displayed who would fight next. Haruka of Suna vs Ito Kenshin of Konoha. Haruka was a girl in the standard Suna wear, though of course with her own personal flair. Her long brown hair was coming out of a black head cap made to make the burning sun not as hot and stop heatstroke. Her skin was a light tan and she looked about 12 or 13. Ito Kenshin was someone they had seen around Konoha, and had graduated with. His teammates being Aburame Hoshi and Yamanaka Jin. He had black hair which was held in a small rat tail ponytail that wasn't more than 4 or so inches long, pale skin, and large stormy gray eyes. On his back was a black-handled ninjutsu. Usually Anbu were seen with these type of swords, but sometimes, especially in Kenjutsu-type clans or families, you saw them on other ninja as well. Naruto herself, who was growing every day with Kenjutsu, only knew the bare basics when it came to other weapons, like the ninjutsu. Her knowledge was focused mostly on katanas, seeing as it was the sword of choice of the Uzumaki and her mother. Ito Kenshin, I've never heard of that clan name before, Kasumi muttered as the fight began between the Konoha and Suna ninjas. That's because he isn't from a clan, Koji said. Not like his teammates. His uncle was from the Gecko clan, which is not very large and isn't one of the main clans of Konoha. But they're known for their kenjutsu, The only gecko left though is a Chunin RGHT now, I think. Shisui knew him since they were in the academy together. He might be a Jonin by now though. Koji shrugged and continued. Ito Kenshin's parents are civilians though. His mother is Gecko's sister who was never a ninja because she had a disease that made her bones too fragile to go into battle with. His father is simply a merchant from what I know. Makoto nodded. As far as I know, that's right, Koji. Kenshin has been a genin as long as you three have, along with his team. They went to the one in Iowa, but failed to pass the second phase of the exam. He's said to be the next Kenjutsu master of Konoha, and with the help of his uncle I don't doubt it, she said. Naruto watched as the boy below attacked, but it seemed while the boy had skill with his sword, he lacked the speed and hand-eye coordination truly needed to utilize them. It was a problem she herself was still getting past, but was having trouble accomplishing. She had the speed, but she had to work more on her reaction time, and she didn't have a bloodline like the Sharingan to help with that problem yet. Haruka seemed to be built for speed, and though Naruto hated to admit it, she was faster than even her. The way she moved was fluid, like sand or wind, and Naruto had little doubt the girl was a wind affinity which was common among Suna. It was proven when the girl began throwing wind jutsus at Kenshin. Naruto sighed. Heel loose, she said. He's good, but his opponent is a wind affinity, and she seems to know what she's doing. Kasumi nodded and added, from experience I know someone who relies on a weapon to beat a wind attack is doomed. Naruto's ended spars that way before with her Diatapa. Makoto smiled at her team proud. Not always, Makoto said, drawing their attention. In this case, he is if he doesn't have any jutsu to defeat her wind, but there are ways for a Kenjutsu master to defeat wind attacks. Speed, being one way, and I'm sure you three could think of other ways given time and the situation. Winner. Haruka. Turning back their attentions, they saw that Kenshin had lost his ninjutsu, probably to a wind attack, and Haruka was above him with a kunai at his throat and one at his heart. The matches continued. Yashira of Kiri versus Hibiki of Kiri. The match ended in a tie, both having knocked each other out. Not surprising seeing as they'd not been going at it as seriously since they seemed to be teammates. Megumi of Kumo versus Aburame Hoshi of Konoha. The battle was seriously one-sided. Hoshi, a girl with shades, pale skin concealed by black high collar trench coat and long black hair pulled up into two high ponytails, used her Kikachu to drain Megumi of her chakra after a short taijutsu battle. Something the Aburame showed promise in, which wasn't surprising seeing as the Aburame were hardly ever seen using many ninjutsu techniques. Mostly they used taijutsu, kenjutsu and their bugs. Needless to say, Aburame Hoshi won. Looks like it's your turn, Naru-chan, Kasumi said, and Naruto looked at the screen and nodded. Uzumaki Naruto vs. Kyo of Iowa. Uzumaki Naruto vs. Kyo of Iowa. Kyo. Her opponent was a boy a few years older than her, probably around 14. This unfortunately made him much taller and obviously bigger than her. In a way this gave her an advantage, as they said, the bigger you were the harder you fall. He had muscles that spoke of his training, and was dressed in black and dark green, his Iwahita 8 on his right left thigh. His hair was dark blue, almost black and spiky as it reached his mid-back and was held by a hair band into a low ponytail. His eyes were sharp, cold, and purple, dark purple. Currently he was looking at his opponent as she stood in front of him, feet away. He would admit to being surprised at how young she looked, clearly the youngest in the exam, yet she didn't look or hold herself like a little girl. If he were less intelligent he'd have goaded her, trying to intimidate her with taunt about her age and running home to cry to her mommy. But he wasn't, and he was relatively good at reading people. There was one other thing that stuck out to him instantly. Her Konoha headband under her long sunset blonde hair, only a shade off from the sunshine locks of the man who'd nearly killed half the ninja of Iowa in the Third Shinobi War, and the same cerulean blue eyes. Even her features looked of him, but were also more feminine and round. The eye shape was also off. The Yondaime Hokage was a man Iwa held a grudge against, though it was slowly ebbing away as the years went on, but it would never truly fade. His own family had nearly been massacred because of that man, Konoha's yellow flash. Namikaze. Kyo sneered, his eyes narrowed and he saw the blonde girl stiffen up. It was all the confirmation he needed. To avenge his clan he'd kill the Kiroi Senko's daughter. Gara watched from the cage booth as Naruto's match was called. He wasn't blind to the sudden look of loathing the boy gave the younger blonde. The name he spat at her, and the way she stiffened was enough for him to think it meant something to her. But what? Her last name was Uzumaki, not Namikaze. His father's face changed as the name was mentioned and once again his father seemed to stare intently at his blonde friend. He didn't really like the strange look his father gave Naruto, as if he was trying to dissect her with his eyes. Though he could be misreading it, he was no good with emotions himself, much less reading another's. Namikaze, his father muttered. So he did have a daughter, it makes sense now. You mean the Yondaime Hokage? But he died nearly 9 years ago, the Wind Daimyo said. The Kazekage smirked. She looks about Gara's age, that means she must have been born around the time he died. He was married, if I recall, to an Uzumaki, he argued. Everyone currently present had looks of awe as they stared at the girl below. My god, she does look like him, the daimyo muttered as Yoshimaru placed the bingo book, and older version with the entry for Namikaze Minato in front of him. The two were obviously related, even Gara who had caught a look at the book entry could see that. Turning back to the match, Gara watched with almost emotionless gaze. I'm going to enjoy this fight, Namikaze, Kyo spat, falling into a stance. Naruto narrowed her eyes and fell into her more commonly used Raiko Kitsune style. I don't know why you Iwa nin keep bringing my father up, but if you haven't noticed my name is Uzumaki Naruto, not Namikaze. I was given my mother's name, and I plan to honor that, she sneered. Kyo scoffed. Makes no difference to me, he said. Enough talk, just fight, Naruto ordered. And like that, the fight began.